Okay, I think we're almost ready to begin. We're going to give everyone another moment to get ready. And I think we're ready. So hello, everyone, and welcome to PMP Live. My name is Leah, and I'm a bookseller of Politics to Prose. And I have the honor, seriously, of being your host today. Thank you so much for joining us and tuning in this virtual format, which allows us to continue to bring these amazing authors and their epic books to readers like you. I'm so excited to welcome our very special guests today, Robin LaFevers and Sabaa Tahir, as they discuss the joys and sorrows of wrapping up such awesome and expansive series. So you can click on the link we're about to drop in the chat to get your own copies of Robin's books, including her newest, Igniting Darkness, this beauty right here. Thank you also, Sabaa. Which will also have signed book plates while supplies last. And also check out Sabaa's amazing books as well, which will also be included in the link. If you have a question for our guests, you can click on the Q&A button. That's going to be at the bottom of your screen right there. And at the end of our chat, our guests will have some time to answer some of your questions. You can also vote on your favorite questions that you really want answered. And as always, remember that this is a creative, safe space, and we ask that friends be respectful of one another in their questions and comments. And of course, thank you all so much for your support. So now on to the event you're all waiting for. It is my honor to introduce and welcome amazingly talented historical fiction and fantasy author, Robin LaFevers. Beautifully blending historical intrigue and rich mythology, Robin is the author of critically acclaimed His Fair Assassin trilogy and its companion duology, Courting Darkness. Writing as R.L. LaFevers, Robin has also written several magical children's series, including Theodosia series and Nathaniel Flood Beastologist series. And tonight we are celebrating the release of the final installment of Courting Darkness duology, Igniting Darkness. And tonight Robin is joined by Sabaa Tahir, best-selling author of the Ember and the Ashes series, and its much, much anticipated fourth and final installment, A Sky Beyond the Storm, as well as the recent graphic novel, A Thief Among the Trees. So now it is my pleasure to pass it over to Robin and Sabaa. The virtual stage is yours.
Thank you, Leah. That was a lovely introduction. I wish we were there in person because I love Politics and Prose. It's one of my favorite bookstores. But I'm just really excited I get to see your face, Robin.
I know, it's been like a year and a half since.
It's been forever. Yes, I'm so excited. So I'm just gonna jump right in. Tell me, like, what was it like to write this book? What was the process like for you? Because this is the last one in this series.
It is, part of it, because it was a second half of a duology, part of it was already baked in because of the structure and because of all the railroad track I'd laid in the first book. But as I got to writing, I realized like some of the major historical events that I was hoping to use for the grand finale weren't going to work or didn't feel fresh enough or didn't quite bring the closure I wanted. So the whole time I'm writing, I'm thinking that ending, the core ending I needed was going to work, but I had to find a better backdrop for it. So, so in some ways it was easy because there was so much big structure put in place, but that ending kept getting away from me. And then also there's a sense that it's the last and you want it to be the very best. You want it to leave like the best possible taste in your reader's mouth. You want it to meet all their expectations and maybe even, expand them. So there's no pressure, just a casual writing exercise.
Yeah. I was gonna say, with those sort of expectations, publishing, is sort of this pressurized environment. There's expectations about sales, there's expectations about awards sometimes, there's expectations about hitting lists or hitting, certain numbers. Do you think that pressure, changes with the final book? Because you sort of mentioned that you have this reader pressure as well, or do you think that you're kind of like, it's almost like that reader pressure is more important than anything else?
Well, the reader pressure is more important than anything else. But what I have found was the books, like Grave Mercy, received more critical acclaim than I ever would have expected. It was just
so good. So fantastic.
Critics were so kind. And then when Dark Triumph came out, the same thing happened. And then after that happens a couple times, you feel like the bar is set so high you can never match it. So that pressure becomes a little intense. And then I just try I don't know about you, but I try so hard to lock out the publishing pressure because it's so toxic to the creative process. So I do all sorts of mind games with myself and try and pretend I'm not really writing for publication or whatever thing, whatever lie I can tell myself that day to get some words on the page.
Right. Yeah.
How about you? How do you deal with that? Because you have an even bigger readership. That I would imagine the pressure would be even greater for you. And I've watched you struggle over this last book over the last few months. I'm surprised you have all your hair and teeth still.
Yeah, I'm surprised too. I think actually it was sort of funny. Like, I felt like creatively, the book really came together. I didn't really feel like it's so agonizing to write or anything like that. It was really when COVID hit that I was like, and it was a lot. It was a very simple thing. It was just time. My kids were at home. I was helping to homeschool them. My husband and I were splitting the time. And that meant that my writing time was cut in half. More than cut in half. It was cut by like 60%. And so that was very tricky. So all of a sudden I felt like this time that I had, everything I had planned was sort of up in the air. And that added a lot of pressure. I don't actually feel, I want my readers to love the book, of course, and I want them to feel satisfied with the ending. But at the same time, I know you can't make every reader happy. Right. And so it's like, I'm very aware of the fact that there are probably going to be some readers who are upset with how I end the book, or who are thrilled with how I ended the book, or, whatever the case may be. And I think I wanted to ask you about that too. Like, you've kind of ended a series in the sense that you had the original trilogy, right? But in terms of ending the story, like, how does it feel to kind of be putting that in the reader's hands completely and just being like, okay, it's yours now?
Right. Well, I want to go back to something. I think there's always such a juggling act between wanting to make readers happy, especially in a series, because you just want to bless them for following you along with all these books.
Yeah.
You also have to stay true to the story and the characters, and sometimes staying true to those almost necessitates disappointing the readers. And I was thinking, especially for you, Sabaa, because you have such an evil reputation about that. So that's always a hard juggle, and I think staying true to the characters always ends up being my default, and I just trust the readers will understand that, because I have very smart readers, and I think they kind of go for that.
Yeah. How did it feel to wrap up the series? Like, emotionally, I would say that I've definitely been kind of a mess as I've been wrapping up Sky, not because it was hard to write. It was actually very easy to write. It was that kind of like what you said, everything's planned. So it's like you sort of have places and slots that you have everything, and you're like, okay, I'm good. But just saying goodbye was really hard for me. Like, I think every time I reread the last, maybe 100 pages or so, I start to cry and get all sad. So like, I'm curious how it was for you.
I was the same way. And I felt like every scene was much more weighted. It was like, is this really good? Is this going to take this character to the best possible place? Am I setting up the choices because I don't know about you, but when I start a book, I have the sense of what emotions I want the reader to experience at the end.
Yeah.
It's kind of my true north. And so I kept thinking, are these the right steps to not only evoke those emotions in the reader, but to bring the characters where I want them to be, to bring them to either the full circle or the new place or the transcendence or what I want them to experience. So, and then knowing I wouldn't get another chance, it made it just very fraught to make sure I was pushing the characters hard as possible, and they were reacting in their truest sense, and then just the sense of, you almost want to slow down the writing process because you don't want to lose time with them, right? It's like just wanting to hang out with them longer. But there may have been tears, like quite a few. It's really emotional, and the thing is, I'm such a coward. I don't know that I've had a number of readers say, so is this really the last book in the series or the world? And it's hard to say. I left a couple of open doors. I left an open door in Mortal Heart and another one in Igniting Darkness. Not really even intentionally, just that was part where the story ended up. I thought, oh, that could be an open door. So just because I don't like closing doors. I don't like shutting off avenues.
I feel that. Yeah, I feel that. You know, you have this series that's so deeply researched. You know, by the time you got to Igniting Darkness, was there any research left to do, or were you like, I got this, I know this?
No, there's always more research to do because they had moved from Brittany to France, so now they were in a whole new French court, and then the damn French court changed castles every 6 weeks, so I had to go research the new castle and find the new floor plan and find the names of the people at that castle.
Right.
And then also because sort of a very fundamental part of the world had changed at the end of the trilogy, I had to kind of feel my way as I went to see what the repercussions would be and how that kind of permeated throughout the whole thing. So there was actually a lot more research than I would have thought there would have been. And then also, again, the original historical ending that I thought I was going to incorporate didn't work. So I had to kind of keep scrambling, looking for a new historical linchpin on which to hang the ending. So there was a lot of last minute frantic research trying to find that perfect little bit of history that I could use.
Yeah. How, like you know, you have the original trilogy, and then you have these two books. How do you know if a book is going to be a trilogy or a duology or a quartet? Is that shape evident as you write, or does it kind of come to you over the course of the series?
It comes to me. I'll be curious to hear your answer about this too. It comes to me pretty early in as the story's coming to me. Like, so a good example is the Courting Darkness duology. It was always two halves, the first and the second half of one bigger story.
Right. And
Courting Darkness actually came in really long after my second draft. It was like 200,000 words, and my editor and I had
nice and big
and not working still. And we had so many conversations trying to think if there was a way we could change it into a trilogy, and there was no way. There was no way structurally we could make that into a trilogy. So I really think it comes early on, and with the original trilogy, it was always going to be following those three girls. So it was a very clear breakdown of 3 different books. How about you?
For me, I did always imagine it as 4. And my story with the books was kind of strange because originally I just sold the one. And it was very much, you know, selling the one and sort of seeing how does the book do. And but I had told my editor and publisher at that time, I was, you know, I was very frank. I was like, this is really not a standalone, even if that's kind of, you know, how you acquired it. It's a 4-book series, and this is what would happen in each book. So like I had the treatment, I had the outline. It's changed a lot from that, but the general storyline was very similar, sort of starting with, and for me, it was very much like each book was kind of a theme, right? So the first book was Revolution. The second book was The Journey. The third book was the villain, you know, or sort of, you know, the victory of the villain. And then the fourth book is war, you know, it's sort of like that. Those are the themes that kind of inform everything I'm thinking about as I write the books. So I had a sense for that when I started, but then it was very much about, okay, but how do you actually make this work, right? And that's completely different. So, I think that so often we have this, I would describe it, my son actually, when he was very little, he asked me, he's like, how do you write books that are so long? How do you know what to write about? And I told him, I was like, you know, I kind of imagine a picture in my head, and the picture just has lots of different things in it. And I'm trying to write down everything that's in the picture. And that's kind of still how I feel, is like I'm trying to capture everything in that picture or that tapestry and get it onto the page in order, sensically, and still really, like, you know, people wanting to read it. And that's the trick.
that is the trick. Although sometimes I find that I write really short, like I have in the past written really short drafts, and then you kind of go in and fill in the details. But lately I seem to be writing like these ridiculously long drafts. And I think it's because it's easier to get so much in the first draft and cut it than it is for me. It's easier to do that than do like 17 drafts or something, because when I don't know about when you edit, but I edit on a hard copy. I can't edit on the screen. I have to like print it out. And there's a lot of input involved, and that's like hard. So it's process is a lot messier that way. So I think I'm trying to get more in my early drafts. But boy, it makes for some monsters.
Yeah, it does. Like those, I mean, I can't give page count or page number away, but my original version of Sky elicited the question from my editor. He was like, "Is it really X many words? Is that a real thing?" And I was like, you know, sorry. So poor guy had to read a massive draft. But I mean, ultimately, I knew, I was like, I threw everything in there, right? Like everything I could think of was in that draft. I knew I was going to cut a lot of words out of it to tighten it up, to get it to where I needed it to be. So I feel that.
Did you, when you started Ember at the very beginning, did you have a sense of the emotional note you wanted Sky to end on? Was that like always there, that true
yeah note? Yeah, and I'm curious about that for you too. I had a very clear sense because I was pulling it from all these stories that I was reading in the news, and a lot of the stories that I read in the news, the ones that struck me the most were the ones that were honest about what really happens in the world, but that were hopeful. And ultimately, like, that was what I was like, this is what I want honest and hopeful. And so that's sort of the only book I think that ended mostly with sort of just, you know, destruction was you know, Reaper. But every other book I really wanted to sort of strike that note of like honest but hopeful. But what about you? How did you want the books to end?
Well, you know, it's funny because I had thought Sybella's story had ended at the end of the trilogy, but she had other ideas. She just kept kind of whispering in my ear over the course of a couple of years saying, "You didn't finish my story. I have all sorts of dangling threads and unresolved issues, and like I've only just understood sort of how to come out of this trauma." And I thought, God, she's right. And then this other voice started whispering in my ear. And so I had...
Was the other voice Genevieve or?
The voice was Genevieve. You know, she was just a one-line throwaway character.
I love her so much.
Oh, did you?
I loved her.
I had a lot of fun with her. It was surprising at first. A lot of readers didn't care for her. And
really, Genevieve? I love Genevieve.
Well, you know, I think part of it was because I don't know why. I think, well, I have a lot of opinions about why react some ways to heroines. But anyway, I think part of it was because they could see the mistake she was going to make. And it was like, they all knew it was stupid, and a lot of them are older, so they're seeing how stupid it is, but they're forgetting when you're 17, you don't have that much foresight, you know.
You're still learning, right?
Still learning, exactly.
And especially if you don't have guidance, which I feel like Genevieve didn't necessarily have the guidance, right?
Right. But the other thing is, I think it's so important that we are allowed to make big wampum mistakes, because as you probably know, that's where we learn our most important lessons.
Yeah.
And it feels like young women and teens today have so narrow a road they're supposed to walk. If you get a B in high school, you don't get into the college of your choice. If you don't get onto the track team, you don't get the extracurriculars you need for your college application. If you say something wrong on social media, or, you know, irk the wrong person at school, there goes your, I mean, there's so little room for error. And that's just not the way the real world works. So I really wanted to show this girl screwing up so badly, but for all the reasons, and then show her trying to put that back together again. But I think because it was such a big screw up and people could see it coming, some people just couldn't. It was too painful for them, I think.
Yeah, it's actually one of you bring up a point that I think is really interesting, sort of this idea that so many of us have readers who are older, right? But ultimately, I always see it as I'm writing for teenagers. That's who I'm writing for. I'm not writing for the adults who are really reading my books. I'm writing for, and I know my books are 14 and up, so it's definitely an older teenager. It's not, you know, 12 or 13-year-old, right? But it always surprises me when, with any young adult books, you have these readers who are like, oh, you know, it was all about these teenagers, and it was like, well, but it's for young adults. Like, it's not for you. Yeah. It's a strange thing that I feel like you see a lot. Like, a lot of YA authors I know have kind of dealt with it, and it's always struck me as kind of weird.
I think it's especially puzzling because we now know, thanks to neuroscience, that the teenage brain is completely different from an adult brain. There are certain parts that have not even developed yet, like impulse control and decision making and empathy. And so, of course, they're going to be making mistakes. And I think the most important thing they can learn. Anyway, so I knew kind of got off on a tangent there. I knew that I wanted her to have made this horrendous mistake and feel like she's destroyed everything she's ever loved, and then find a way for her not only to come back from that, but find self-forgiveness and actually end up not only being okay with it, but realizing that in making that mistake, she actually allowed things to happen maybe in a better way than they would have otherwise. Because again, I think that happens sometimes in our lives.
I love that so much. I really do. So I guess one thing I'm wondering is, which character did you have the hardest time saying goodbye to?
All of them, except for the villain. Them I was like happy to kick to the curb, but all of them, I might end up having to write fan fiction about them, so I don't have to say
just
goodbye.
so that you can keep connecting. I know, right? I'm like, I need to write like a book. Like Victoria Aveyard wrote this great book of short stories after her final book came out, and I'm like, oh, I should totally do that to like have my closure. So without spoiling too much, can you illuminate, and I think this might be the last question before we go to audience questions, but could you illuminate any sort of turns in the book that were unintentional, anything that you were not planning for and you were like, oh no, I don't know what to do with this, or anything like that?
The performing bear.
Mm.
And I think that that's so random and so will mean nothing to anybody unless they read the book, but like that just kind of came out of, that was like, I really didn't expect to have a performing bear in the book. And there he was, and he was kind of important to the plot.
Yeah.
Also, I think gunpowder, I hadn't really expected that going in, because people think of the Middle Ages not being associated with gunpowder. That came later, but actually it had been around since like the mid 14th century.
Oh, okay.
And that ended up being a key part of the book and the solution and the burn it all, thematic thing. So those were a couple of pretty unexpected. How about you?
Yeah.
Was there anything that really caught you off guard, especially because you've been like working to this endpoint for such a long time?
I initially had a lot more characters slated to die. I know that sounds really dark, but that's the truth. I had, and it was because I had sort of, this whole thing planned, and I was like, okay, this one and this one and this one. And then as I was going, I was like, actually, some of these really don't, some of them totally made sense and still happened, but some of them I was like, this really doesn't make sense. This person would not allow this thing to happen. Like it wouldn't make sense. And then the second big one for me was I had one character who I was planning to, this character was gone, and my mother actually stepped in and was like, don't you dare. I will never make you prata again. I will never make you any of the foods you like don't you dare. And she was so adamant. I was like, okay, I guess I have to find a way to make this character live. Thankfully, it was early on.
Yeah. So when all your readers read the book and that person doesn't die that they think was going to die, they have your mother to thank, is what you're saying.
Yes, they absolutely have her to thank. And I will probably, much later on say who it is, once the book's been out 6 months, I'll let people know. But it was really funny. And she's still, she hasn't read the book yet. I've been waiting just till I can send her like a paper copy. But she'll check in and she'll be like, you didn't kill so-and-so, right? And I'll be like, I told you, like, I didn't kill them.
Mom, I promise. That's really funny.
So with that, I think we can go to audience questions, which I think Leah is going to help us with.
I can read them.
Hello. Yeah, thank you both so much. That was awesome.
It went so fast. My goodness.
Yeah, it did. It was like
so I guess we'll go to audience questions. Everybody, you can still add them down there or upvote the ones you really want heard. And our first question is from Laura. Laura asks, and this is for both of you, do you have any examples or tips when it comes to leaving doors open? Maybe continuation of your awesome series. Robin, if you want to start.
Well, for me, I think the secret to that is always have all the characters, even the secondary ones, not just appear on the stage as a prop, but be coming from an interesting life of their own. So they're not just waiting in the wings to come on, be on stage with your character, but show them when they do finally appear or a one line is thrown off about them, they have some interesting story there. So Genevieve is a great example. The one line in Mortal Heart was just, oh, you mean 12-year-old Genevieve who was sent to be a mole in the French court? And right there, my brain sort of hooked on that and wanted to know more about her. So I think the more interesting you make your secondary characters, and the more you have a sense of what big things are going in their lives, or what problems they're wrestling with, that kind of leaves a lot of room open. And then I think just not wrapping up every single detail neatly leaves room for open doors, because that detail can be teased into an actual thread that can be then teased into an entire book, I think, for me.
Yeah, I really agree with with Robin. I think thinking ahead to characters who I also think sort of thinking about your world, right? Which characters are going to be important to the world as a whole? Which characters will have a story in that world as a whole? So Genevieve was a mole in the court. Like, that's a very interesting, like she said, hook, a very interesting story. She has a role to play in this world. And so I can't give any examples because I've only written the one series. But I have left doors open at the end of the book, because there's sort of certain characters who it's almost like I'm kind of keeping an eye on them in case that's the story that I want to tell. I'm acting like I don't know what the next story I'm going to tell is, but I totally do. But I think just sort of thinking about your world, and also maybe leaving some places in your world undiscovered. I think that's really important. Like, you know, especially if it's a fantasy, you don't have to be limited to just one part. Throughout the Ember series, there's, you know, we talk about, you know, the southern lands and the tundra and like these far, far, far western lands. And we don't know anything about those lands, but that's great, because that means that if I ever do want to write within the world again, I can go somewhere else. And I think someone who did that really well is Leigh Bardugo. You know, Leigh had, you know, you saw these places on the map in Shadow and Bone, but you didn't know anything about them. And then she wrote Six of Crows, and all of a sudden, this one city that, you know, you don't know anything about is expanded into this whole world with, you know, thieves and you know, all this stuff going on. And I just think that that was so beautifully done, and it's something that I recommend for writers, like, just kind of think about not just the character, but the world.
I think I want to jump on your point about not leaving some of the fantasy elements unexplored. I think that's really key, because first of all, it helps you avoid that massive info dump that kind of can put readers off. If we don't need to know it, it's not relevant to the story, it doesn't need to be included. But I've had so many readers ask me questions about the world, or what about these saints or that saints? And I legitimately don't know, because I save that so that if I decide to write about it, I can learn that at that time and not like paint myself into any corners.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I think we're going to take another question. So our next question is from Blanca. And Blanca asks, does it hurt when you kill your characters? I can let Sabaa, if you want to start with this one.
Yeah, it does. It hurts. I mean, I joke about it online a lot. I'm always like, ha ha ha, I'll kill your face. But the truth is, like, you know, all of these characters have lived with me since 2007. They're older than my actual children. You know, they've been with me longer than my actual children, and they always will be, right? Because they came first. And, you know, taking any of them and, you know, getting rid of them, it's hard, because you're not really just getting rid of a character. You're to some degree getting rid of almost like an archetype, right, of a person, like a friend or a parent, or, you know, whatever the case may be. And to some degree, it would remind me of how often that happens in our world, and how unheralded it is, and how there's no book for that. There's no fandom to mourn. There's no fan art that can remind you of how much you love that character. There's just the people who love that person and the hole that's inside them. And that sucks. So it's, you know, I always mourn my characters, and Sky was really hard because of that. It was really hard. And that's one of the many reasons that I cried all the way through the end every time I read it, because every single time it's a reminder.
Yeah, I think it's always hard to kill off characters, unless they're the villains. Those guys are kind of fun. But Although for me, because I was writing around history, I wasn't able to kill off as many villains as I would like. I had to find more creative ways to like punish them.
Make them suffer.
You know their poisons.
I also think one of the reasons it's so hard, and so I'd be curious to know if this is true for you too, and it's true that the characters are all to some degree archetypes, but I also think most of the main characters, even if we don't know it, have some little piece of ourselves in them.
Agreed.
So when they die, it feels like a little part of ourself is dying.
Yeah, it does. I agree. I think we put little pieces of ourselves into the characters, you know, even if it's one decision they make, you know, or one plot thread that they go down, because ultimately we have to sit in our characters and ask ourselves, okay, what would Sybella do? What would Genevieve do? What would Laia do? Like, what, you know, we have to sit there, but that means that it's us who's still sitting in those shoes, right? And so you do end up kind of investing pieces of yourself into the character.
And not even consciously. I don't even think we do it consciously. I just think it should, like, I can't tell you how many times I've read a book 3 years later and went, well, shoot, there I am for all the world to see. Hopefully they won't know that comes from me.
You like see yourself like working out your own issues.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
Not that I've ever.
No, I've never done that, but theoretically,
I'm talking about other people.
Other people. I can see that with other writers. Yeah.
Yeah, other writers.
Oh.
Is there one, just kind of my own question, is there one for each of you that you kind of connect with the most from your books?
Character-wise? Main character?
Yeah.
I connect with Elias the most, and the Nightbringer, which is a little awful, but I think the Nightbringer I connect with because he is was a parent. And the way that he loved his children is something I really relate to. That kind of, you know, burn it down if anyone hurts them mentality that I think so many parents feel, you know, like, it's funny because anyone who like loves the Nightbringer, most of them have kids. They're like, I totally get it. I totally get why he's mad, you know? And then Elias, because I think Elias is sort of always, he has a little bit of a sort of a savior complex, and he's always kind of hard on himself in a way. Like he's always kind of like, oh, I did that wrong. And I feel like that's something that I definitely relate to. He's also an angster. I too am an angster.
You're speaking to angsters, right?
Yes. Woo. But how about you, Robin?
So I'm going to say too also, so Sybella and Aneth. Aneth is probably the one who I have most in common with in terms of my external life, in terms of sort of living a lot of my life for a large portion of it for other people, and being a people pleaser, and like feeling like if I wasn't perfect at everything, I was going to have failed. But I think Sybella, she's actually my subconscious, and she's like the part of myself that I wouldn't let myself acknowledge, that angry, furious, pissed off part that wants to go like knock everybody's skulls together. So and she was interesting too, because she was a secondary character that showed up on the page in the first book, and she almost took over the book. I said, no, you have to go, this isn't your story. Okay, I'll tell you, you'll be next, but this isn't your story. And I think she definitely was like totally coming. It's pretty clear now that she was definitely one of those subconscious characters that's showing up on the page saying, we're going to work this stuff out now, bitch. And so we did.
Yeah, I feel that.
This next one comes from Carolina, and it's a good segue because Carolina asks, where does most of your inspiration come from when building the world of your books, like character names, nature, animals, language?
Since mine are historical, yours, you probably have more to say on this, since I just look in encyclopedias.
Yeah, it's a lot of places. So one is news stories for events, just because there's so much going on in the world that I think a lot of people don't pay attention to. I remember at one event, somebody came up to me afterward and they were like, you know, why do you write about child soldiers when that's not really, you know, something like that's, you know, it's not really something that really affects us. And I was like, well, it doesn't affect you, but it does affect, you know, thousands of children in different parts of the world that are not America. I remember early on sort of being told that the sort of threat of rape in the book was overdone and wasn't necessary. And I was really taken aback because I was like, do you not understand that that's been a tool of war for thousands of years? And it was only just acknowledged by the UN as an actual like tool of war that could be, you know, prosecuted. Like, that you could, that entire armies were taught that this is something you do to oppress the population. So it was very bizarre to me that people didn't, you know, but then I realized, I was like, well, no, because they're not connecting with what's happening in the outside world. It's something I did because it was my work, but it's something a lot of people don't really have that connection to. So that's a huge part of the inspiration of these books. And then they're inspired a lot by my own background. I'm Pakistani. You know, my culture, my name, I'm also Muslim. You know, my name, my culture, my stories, they are mythology that's sort of spread across parts of South Asia and the Middle East and North Africa. You know, all of the places where Islam ended up spreading. And so, so that also ended up being a big part of the inspiration for the books.
Writing historical fantasy, I tend to find just motherloads of inspiration in historical things I come across. The whole concept of assassin nuns came about because I found a little tidbit in Middle Ages history book talking about how many noblewomen of the time preferred to join a convent because it gave them more autonomy and freedom than their other societal roles. And that just blew my mind to think that that would be a freeing choice. So, or that I stumbled across an actual 12-year-old duchess who inherited a kingdom whose father had offered her hand in marriage to 6 different heads of state whenever he needed aid in his war against France. I mean, history provides that inspiration right there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to take the next question is from Mackenzie. And Mackenzie asks, how has the pandemic or shutdowns changed your writing habits? And is it harder to be creative? And how do you deal with that, if so?
So I don't know about you, Sabaa, but I lost all executive function when the pandemic got here. It's like, I can't focus on anything. Fortunately for me, I was getting ready to go on a creative hiatus anyway, because I finished the book and I knew I was gonna take a few months off. And actually, oddly enough, I started writing earlier than I intended to, just because I needed someplace, a world to go escape into. I just started just one of those just for me to play in a sandbox worlds. And I haven't worked on it very much in the last few weeks just because things have been crazy. But if I were on deadline, I don't know how you did it. I don't know how you were on deadline with the pandemic, and not even counting the schooling for your kids and stuff, but just the mental pressure of it all was so fragmenting.
You know, I was really, really lucky in that I had finished the second draft of the book by the time the pandemic started. So I wasn't working with having to come up with everything. What I was really doing was refining. I think if that had not been the case, completely different story. I really don't think Sky would be coming out this year if that had been the case. I mean, I'm like really, really thankful that I worked on it when I did, that I had the deadlines I did, because I turned in an early draft, and then I was sort of turning in pages all through the very beginning of the year. The book was turned in. I was like, okay, you know, I'm working on something else. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, and it slowed down so many projects that I've been working on, none of which I can talk about, but and that has been troubling and sort of depressing and hard. But I think, you know, the thing that I have sort of gotten out of this is that everybody is struggling in their own way, and I've been really moved by the people and inspired by the people who were able to reach out to me, even when they themselves were going through something that was difficult. And I find it incredible. I was like really inspired by just sort of the human spirit of people who, you know, were like, okay, I know that I'm going through something hard, but so are you. Like, let me talk to you. Early on in the pandemic, I was really struggling, and I have a friend and a sibling who I spoke to almost every single day for weeks, who were just like, you know, who just knew. They were like, this person needs someone to talk to. And so, yeah, I would talk to them almost every single day. And that was really giving and kind when they were going through their own things. So as things have gone on and I've started to sort of feel better and feel more level and be like, okay, the book is almost done. I'm doing like very tiny little edits now. I've sort of tried to find a way to do that for people I know who might be like, now that we're getting into month 6, are struggling now, right? Like early on they were okay, but we're sort of swapping, right? So that's kind of how I've been getting through it. And then creatively, I think you have to just be kind to yourself and realize that this is not a normal time. And that if you're, you know, especially if you're an author who has a book due or, you know, whatever, or, you know, you're due yourself, like you're telling yourself, I have a book due, just remember, like, it's not a normal time. And we shouldn't pretend it is. It's not fair to us.
I've seen so many like tweets going around, and I always try and retweet them that say, you know, don't knock yourself out for not writing a new great piece of literature. Don't knock yourself out for creating a masterpiece. Don't knock yourself out for getting your house organized. Our brain is really at a point, it's at, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're down at like the levels 1 and 2. We're really just sort of trying to maintain survival and not have this, you know, this pandemic get us. So it's really unfair to expect ourselves to be performing up at the self-actualization creativity level. So
agreed.
I always try and remind people and myself of that, although it's hard.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you so much. That was cool. So we have time for a couple more questions.
Okay.
So our next one is from Kathleen. Kathleen asks, and this one is for Robin. Do you think you'll ever write about the other saints? Are we going to dive deeper into the 9, maybe? Other 9?
It's possible. It is possible. I have some ideas about some of them. I was intrigued by Saint Salonius. He was pretty fascinating. The trickster saint, and Father Ephraim. So yes, it's, again, never say never. One of my things is I've been working on these books now since like 2006, because I worked on Grave Mercy for like 5 years before I even shared it with my agent and my editor. So like Sabaa, I've been like working forever in this world, and I just feel like I need to do something different for a little while. I'm afraid it will I don't want it to get stale, so I'm going to leave it now while I still love it, and there's still lots of possibilities. And there's some other ideas calling to me that I'm going to go play with. But I can't imagine not returning to that world at some point. But it won't be for a while. And all, like Saint Mare, she's kind of fascinating. I would be really curious to know all of them are. But I try not to answer those questions ahead of time so I can save those as a story exploration thing.
We have time for maybe one more. So our next one is from Laura, and Laura asks, do you have any tips on nailing character arcs?
Nailing character arcs?
Arcs. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's like a half an hour answer.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that's a class.
Like, how do you?
Basically.
I'm like, I have a skills class. Go take it.
Yes. You're both impressively really drawn these really full characters.
I think. Sorry, go ahead, Robin.
No, you go ahead.
No, please. My answer was dumb.
Well, my answer was not much less than dumb. This is going to sound a little bit self-promoting, I don't mean it to, but if you go to my Instagram feed, I have got, like, that most of my posts are basically workshops, writing workshops, and there's so many on character, and you have to kind of shuffle through them, but pretty much everything I know about writing character is somewhere in there on a post. But basically it's about making them fully realized and having a sense of what they want. Maybe they don't know they want anything. Maybe they're just so suppressed they don't know that, but finding out then what they need, and then taking them through the hard, your story then sets up the perfect crucible to get them to learn to accept and face those needs and achieve them, or not, and find a healthier need. And it's not about a character sheet. It's about their internal landscape, about knowing that internal landscape. I said in another event I did that for my characters, I basically do 2 notebooks worth of like psychological profiling on them. I don't just need to know that my character has a hard time trusting. I need to know which specific incident in their childhood when they were 7 years old caused them to stop trusting anybody ever again. And I think when you use super concrete details like that, even though maybe only a line or two of it makes its way into the actual book, it brings the character to life for yourself and the readers in a way that just a regular character sheet won't do it.
Yeah. I think just sort of balancing that internal and external arc, like it really isn't just about, that external goal, whatever it might be. It's about what they're going through inside, right? And I also think that character arcs don't always have to be massive changes. Yeah. I sort of feel like there's this belief that like you have to go from one end to the other. And one of the things I sort of saw with Ember, particularly with the first book, is people were saying, Laya is, she's not brave, and she gets a little bit braver by the end of the book, but she's still not out there, kicking ass kind of thing. And to me, it was, I understood why people were saying that, but I also think that it's not real life to go from sort of being a certain way and completely altering yourself over the course of just like a couple of months. Usually change that sticks takes much, much longer. So I do think it's good to, like Robin said, sort of understand that psychological profile and think about why not just what your characters are doing, but why they're doing those things. If you really examine your own life, you can see that sometimes even the smallest decisions are informed by who you've become over the course of years, whether you're on time to something or not, whether you bring everything you need or not to that thing. I'm sort of notorious for always leaving something in my house and going back and having to grab it, right? But that's, the me I am now is informed by everything that's happened to me. So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind.
And Sabaa, I want to sort of jump in on something you said about not every arc has to be massive. I think that's really true, and I think that's especially true in writing about women. I think sometimes the strongest act of radicalism we can achieve is to be more ourselves. So instead of changing who we are, sort of double down on who we are. And that's kind of what I was trying to do with Genevieve. It's like she didn't have this big change of arc. She just stubbornly believed in herself. She met some huge bumps and had to really dig down deep to find that belief and not lose heart of it. But that staying true to yourself in spite of what the world throws at you, I think can also be a very effective arc. And it doesn't have to be this big change, especially for women.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. So I think we have to start wrapping up questions. I will give a shout out. We have one person in the questions, Blanca, that wanted to say hi from Chile, that they went to Courting Darkness and Reaper Union that you did in San Francisco in February 2019. Thank you for the opportunity of joining us again. So also from all of us, thank you guys for coming together again.
Yes.
And thank you all for joining us this afternoon and taking an hour to come chat with us and ask such great questions. And I'm just sorry we didn't see your beautiful faces and wave at you and do that thing, but next time.
Yes, next time in person. So we always like to end on one question, and actually one of our attendees also asked it too. So we'll end on Leah's question, a fellow Leah, and ask, what have you read and loved recently when not writing? So what are you reading now? So
this is not a very satisfying answer, but this book has saved me. It's the thing, there's been a lot of turmoil in my life, my personal life, the last 6 weeks. So I'm reading a book called When Things Fall Apart by Ember. Is that how you say your name? I'm massacring it, I know. Anyway, I'm loving it, but it's not really a fiction book that this is probably not what you're looking for. But if you ever have a part in your life that is a rough patch, I would highly recommend it. Actually, no, that kind of describes 2020, doesn't it? So maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's probably appropriate for the current.
Yeah.
time. I am reading this book right now and I love it so much. It's called Wings of Ebony. It's by J.L. It's coming out in February of 2021. It is so good.
It looks amazing.
So good. So I am about 100 pages in and I like love it and I just want to read it all the time, but I actually have to limit the amount of reading I do every day because of this eye problem I'm having. So it's really torturous. I'm like, I want to keep reading. It's very good. I highly recommend it. Stick it on your TBRs. And then in terms of a book that's coming out very soon, Legend Born by Tracy Dion is fantastic. It's so creative. It's like a urban fantasy, but takes place in North Carolina. And it's like King Arthurian legend. And it's like one of the most original books I've ever read. It's wonderful. So I highly recommend if you need a book, I believe it's coming out very soon. It might even be next week. So next week or the week after, I think it's coming out. So definitely put that on your TBRs. Get it from Politics and Prose.
There you go.
They'll hook you up.
Pre-order link for you.
Exactly.
Wow. Thank you all so much. I think that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you all so much for your great contributions. And of course, many, many thanks to Robin and Sabaa for joining us this evening and sharing their words and insights. And of course, thank you all so much, viewers, for joining us today. Don't forget, you can still click on the link. We'll put it back in the chat box to get your own copy of Robin's newest book, Igniting Darkness. Let me check that one, as well as all the other amazing titles by Robin and Sabaa. And to find out more about our upcoming events, definitely check out our website for our upcoming listings. And you can also follow our children and teen department on social media. We'll put that information in the chat box as well. And you can also watch our other events as well as this one will be eventually posted on our YouTube page. So of course, thank you all so much again. I hope you all keep reading widely and expanding your world and exploring new ones. So stay safe and thank you all so much again.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Leah. Bye, guys.
Bye.